Welcome to the Mind Cut series. In this series, we basically take one really compelling story, someone's experience, and try to pull out the key insights, the practical stuff that you can maybe think about or use in your own life.
Exactly.
And today, we're diving into Shayna Taylor's story. It's quite fascinating. She's known in the health and wellness space, background in modeling too, but she made this huge leap.
A really huge leap.
Yeah, left what looked like a pretty set life in L.A. Successful, to chase this dream of farming, of living a more, I guess, grounded life in Italy. Her story really grabbed us.
It really did. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I fancy a change. She sold her house, packed, 3 suitcases?
Something like that, yeah. Just went for it.
And moved continents. It makes you ask some big questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
What really pushes someone to make such a radical shift?
Totally. And what can we, learn from her experiences about these different lifestyles, different ways of approaching well-being?
Yeah, and navigating that kind of change.
Exactly. So through Shayna's journey, we want to explore a few core ideas. First, what are the real fundamental differences between, say, the modern American way of life and this more traditional Italian approach, especially when it comes to food and health?
That food piece seems huge in her story.
It really does. Second, what are the practical steps, the nitty-gritty involved in making a major life change like that? And how do you handle the curveballs, the stuff you didn't expect? Because there were definitely some.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't all smooth sailing.
Not at all. And finally, this idea of consciously reconnecting with nature and also focusing inward on inner peace. How does that actually impact our health? Things like gut health, anxiety, areas she really focuses on.
Okay, yeah, lots to get into there.
Right. So let's unpack this.
Okay, so her initial move, it came after, I think, an 8-year relationship ended. So there was that element of closing a chapter.
Right. A natural point for change, maybe.
But it sounds like it was more than just leaving something behind. It was this pull towards something, this dream she'd had for ages about owning farmland, living closer to nature.
And the speed of it is kind of remarkable. She describes it as almost spontaneous. Sell the house, book the ticket.
Yeah, not like years of planning, more like a moment of, okay, this is it now. Makes you think about intuition versus, mapping everything out perfectly.
Definitely. That point where the inner pull just becomes stronger than the external situation. And one of the first big shifts she noticed in Italy, the whole food culture.
Oh, massively different. She talks about this deep love for food, how central community is to meals, these long, unhurried dinners.
Worlds away from the, eat at your desk or grab something. And culture is pretty common here.
And it's not just enjoying food, it's the values underneath it. Local produce, grass-fed meats, raw dairy, that's just normal. It's integrated.
Not something you have to specifically seek out in a special section.
Exactly. Food is connected to the land, to community, to the whole experience. It's not just fuel you pick up in plastic.
She really contrasts that with what she called the transactional nature of food in America sometimes. You go to the store.
Yeah.
It's often unclear where things came from. It's packaged up. You pay. You leave. Kind of disconnected.
Very disconnected. And that leads to her point about the health food section in U.S. supermarkets.
Yeah, that's a sharp observation.
It really is. What does it signal when the healthy stuff is cordoned off? It implies the rest of the store is, something else.
Right, like health is an add-on, a special category you have to consciously choose, rather than just being the default way food is.
Whereas in Italy, it seems much more baked into the everyday food system.
Okay, but here's where the dream meets reality. Her vision of this idyllic farm life, it hit some snags pretty quickly, right? Buying property in Umbria.
Yeah, that initial excitement ran into some practical difficulties, inspections, renovation delays. It's just the whole process of the purchase turned out to be way more complex than she expected.
It highlights those big differences in how things work, doesn't it? Business practices, bureaucracy.
Totally. She tells this story about an Amazon business card, I think. Something totally normal for expenses in the U.S., but it raised flags in the Italian tax system.
Wow.
It's kind of funny, but it shows those fundamental differences. You can't just assume things operate the same way. You really have to do your homework and maybe adjust your expectations.
A lesson in humility, perhaps.
She definitely describes it that way, realizing that being an American didn't automatically make navigating the Italian system easy.
Makes sense. But despite the property headaches, she was drawn to Umbria specifically. Why there compared to, say, Tuscany?
She felt it was more authentic, less saturated with tourists, maybe. Fewer English speakers, which for her seemed to add to the appeal. She wanted that genuine immersion.
Okay.
Plus, it's known as the green heart of Italy. Very lush, lots of nature, temperate climate. It fit that desire for a grounded, nature-connected life.
So sometimes the less trodden path leads to a deeper connection.
Seems like that was her experience. And that whole challenging experience, that humility piece, actually fed into her passion for farming, regenerative farming specifically.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
She got really interested in how nature used to work before large-scale industrial agriculture. Biodynamic principles, thinking about the farm as a whole living organism, focusing on soil health, biodiversity.
Which is pretty different from a lot of the industrialized farming we see in the U.S.
Very different. Italy generally still has agriculture that's perhaps closer to that, less industrialized overall. She tells another anecdote about asking for grass-fed steak in Colombia once. And the waiter was just confused, what other kind of steak is there?
Right, because that's just the norm there.
Yeah.
It shows how specialized in, industrialized our system can seem from the outside.
Exactly. And for Shayna, this whole reconnecting with nature, with how food is actually grown, it became more than just farming. It felt like a healing force for her.
Interesting. Healing from what?
From that sense of disconnection she felt was so common in modern life. She uses this phrase, human beings versus human doings.
I like that.
Yeah, shifting from constant striving and productivity to just being present, being connected. Nature seemed to facilitate that for her.
Okay, so she's in Italy. She's got this land vision, but the house stuff is messy. She's basically starting from scratch. What were the immediate day-to-day challenges like besides the property stuff?
Well, isolation was a big one initially, especially being in a rural area without easy transportation.
Right, that would be tough anywhere, let alone in a new country where you don't fully speak the language yet.
Absolutely. It sounds overwhelming. And she says that's where the inner work she'd done before the move became so crucial. Those spiritual tools, coping mechanisms.
So the inner foundation was already being built? It wasn't just about the external change?
Precisely. It gave her resilience when things got unexpectedly stressful, which they did.
That's a really key point. The internal prep matters just as much, maybe more, than the external logistics sometimes?
She had this realization, she calls it, home is your vessel. Finding that sense of peace and stability within yourself no matter where you physically are.
So your sense of home isn't just tied to a building or a place.
Exactly. It's something you carry with you. That adaptability, that inner calm that became her focus.
Was she completely alone in navigating this, though? Or did she have support?
Oh, she definitely emphasizes friendships. There's a lovely story about a friend, Olga, who just showed up, surprised her, right when she was feeling super overwhelmed.
Wow. That's a good friend.
Isn't it? Just that human connection, knowing someone's got your back, can make such a difference, especially when you're feeling adrift.
For sure. And practically speaking, what did she do to make this new, uncertain environment feel a bit more like hers?
Small things initially, focusing on basics, like getting kitchen supplies sorted, establishing some kind of simple routine.
Creating pockets of normalcy amidst the chaos.
Kind of, yeah. Just regaining a little bit of control, making her immediate space functional and comfortable. Those small acts can be really grounding when everything else feels up in the air.
And grounding.
Yes.
That brings us back to nature, right? That was a big part of her coping, too.
Huge. Just spending time outside, walking the land, connecting with the Umbrian landscape. She found that incredibly restorative for her well-being. It wasn't just scenery, it was therapy in a way.
It really reinforces how essential that connection is for us, mentally and emotionally.
Definitely. And it was during this time, this quieter period in Italy with more space for reflection, that she had another big realization about her own health.
Okay, what was that?
She recognized she'd been living with this chronic underlying anxiety for a long time, something she hadn't fully seen or acknowledged back in her faster-paced LA life.
The quiet allowed her to hear the background noise, so to speak.
Exactly, the slower rhythm, the stillness. It brought it to the surface. And she saw how it was impacting her health overall. That awareness was the first step towards developing ways to manage it. Grounding, visualization, meditation became key tools.
Let's dig into those contrasts between Italy and the U.S. a bit more. She mentioned food cost and quality differences.
Yeah, pretty stark differences, according to her. She gives examples like blueberries being way cheaper, or just getting a massive haul of fresh, amazing vegetables for very little money compared to the U.S.
Why do you think that is? Closer to local farms? less industrial scale?
Probably a combination of those things. Shorter supply chains, maybe less emphasis on perfect-looking, long shelf-life produce, and just a different agricultural economy. It challenges that idea that eating really well has to be super expensive.
And this ties back to her idea of food as a relationship in Italy, not just a transaction.
Right. It's about appreciating the ingredients, knowing the source. The social aspect of cooking and eating together is a whole different mindset.
And she believes this approach actually benefits gut health and overall well-being, right? Even with things like pasta and bread being common.
Yeah, that's the interesting paradox. In the U.S., pasta and bread often get demonized. But in Italy, eaten as part of this balanced diet with fresh ingredients, maybe smaller portions, enjoyed slowly. It doesn't seem to have the same negative impact for many people. The context matters.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
But she does miss some things about the U.S., right? It's not all idyllic.
Oh, for sure. She acknowledges missing the sheer convenience of American life.
Yeah.
And also some of the, biohacking trends, specific wellness services that are maybe more readily available in major U.S. cities.
So there are trade-offs. Access to certain things might be easier stateside.
Definitely. Every lifestyle choice has its pros and cons.
And the overall pace of life, that seems like a fundamental difference too.
Huge. She describes Italy feeling like it's 100 years back in time in some ways. Not in a bad way necessarily, but just slower, less frantic.
Less of the rat race feeling.
Exactly. More emphasis on balance, perhaps. She mentions the classic example of Europeans taking August off. That reflects a different cultural priority around rest and just living life versus constant productivity.
Okay, so beyond the lifestyle change, Shayna's journey was also deeply personal in terms of her health, particularly gut health.
Yes, this became a major focus for her. She'd struggled for years with various chronic issues, skin problems, bloating, digestive stuff.
Things that conventional medicine hadn't quite figured out.
Exactly. She went down a long road searching for answers, and that led her to really zero in on the gut.
Which we now know is so central to, well, pretty much everything, right? Immunity, mood, brain function.
Absolutely. The science on the gut microbiome is just exploding. It's this crucial barrier, a gateway. Its balance affects our entire system. For Shayna, a turning point was meeting a Dr. Joffrey and doing detailed stool testing, a GI map.
What did that reveal?
It helped pinpoint specific imbalances, things like Candida overgrowth, maybe parasites, bad bacteria, H. pylori, specific targets they could then address.
But it wasn't just about supplements or diet changes, was it? She connected it back to her inner state, too.
Crucially, yes. She realized that the chronic stress and anxiety she'd uncovered were directly impacting her gut. You can't really heal the gut fully, she believes, without also addressing the nervous system, the inner turmoil. Mind and body are completely linked.
That makes so much sense. The gut-brain axis is a real thing.
Totally. And that holistic understanding, the need to address both the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual side, led her to create her program, Inner Alchemy.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, it basically combines Dr. Joffrey's scientific approach to gut testing and protocols with Shayna's expertise in practical cooking, nutrition, and her focus on stress management, mindfulness, those spiritual tools.
So it's a really comprehensive approach.
Exactly. It covers lifestyle, diet, supplements, cooking skills, the science behind it all, how to manage chronic symptoms, the whole picture.
Yeah.
And they're structuring it in phases now, I think, to make it feel less overwhelming and more accessible for people.
That sounds really valuable. Okay, shifting slightly, Shayna also talks a lot about daily rituals, especially her morning routine. Why is that so important to her?
For her, it's absolutely non-negotiable. It's about setting the tone for the entire day. How you start your morning kind of dictates the energy you carry.
And she dedicates serious time to it, right?
Yeah, like 2 hours before she even looks at work or emails or her phone. That protected time is key.
Wow. 2 hours. What does she actually do in that time?
It's quite specific. Waking up early is the first step. Then engaging with some kind of spiritual wisdom, reading, listening. She does things like drink bone broth, take a shot of olive oil and lemon, has matcha.
Okay, some specific nutritional rituals too.
And then the core practices. Avoiding the phone first thing, grounding, meditation, journaling, gratitude. It's a sequence designed to nourish her mentally, physically, emotionally before the day's demands kick in.
Her meditation practice. How has that evolved?
Yeah.
And does she address the common struggle of, the monkey mind?
Yeah, she mentioned moving from guided meditations, which can be great for starting, to more self-directed inner work. And she has a really helpful take on the busy mind thing.
What's that?
Instead of seeing thoughts during meditation as a failure or an obstacle, she suggests viewing them as information rising to the surface. Insights, unprocessed stuff, you can just observe it without judgment. That takes the pressure off trying to achieve a totally blank mind, which is unrealistic for most people.
That's a much more approachable way to think about it.
Yeah.
And what benefits does she feel she gets from meditating consistently?
She talks about receiving downloads like intuitive insights or clarity on problems. Also, just a greater sense of inner peace, feeling less reactive to things that happen during the day.
Less easily triggered.
Exactly. She compares it a bit to that clear present feeling you get after a good workout. That kind of meditative state. Consistent meditation cultivates that presence more regularly.
So it's really about strengthening that muscle of present moment awareness.
Precisely. Breaking free from getting caught up in anxieties about the future or regrets about the past, which is where so much of our suffering comes from, right? Just being here now.
So thinking back over Shayna's whole journey, this big life change, the health discoveries, what are the main takeaways that stand out to you?
Well, first, definitely the power of consciously reconnecting with nature. It wasn't just a backdrop for her. It was an active force for healing and grounding. And tied to that, the importance of prioritizing inner well-being, that inner work.
Yeah, the home is your vessel idea.
Exactly. Second, the value of looking at different cultural approaches, especially around food. Her observations about Italy really challenge you to think about your own relationship with food, community, and pace of life. It's not about saying one is better, but about seeing the possibilities.
Learning from the contrast.
Right. And finally, her health journey really hammers home the need for a holistic view, understanding that gut health, stress, mental well-being, it's all interconnected. You often need to address it all to find real, lasting health.
It definitely makes you reflect on your own life, doesn't it? Where's your connection to nature? How mindful are you about food? What's your inner landscape like?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. In this world that pulls us towards convenience, towards distraction constantly, what's one small thing, one tiny step you could take today maybe to reconnect with something basic, whether it's nature or mindful eating or just a moment of quiet to cultivate a bit more grounding in your own life?
That's a great question to sit with. And if you want to follow Shayna Taylor's work further, you can find her on Instagram. Her handle is Shayna Taylor. That's ShainaTheres Taylor. And her website is shane'skitchen.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Shayna's really inspiring story.
Mm-hmm.
Lots to think about.